And what we have to do, I think, is armor ourselves and then isolate ourselves, go into the shed, proverbially. Just go into the shed and make sure that we're protecting ourselves in our solitude while we're trying to go into these places that a lot of people are not going to deem worthwhile places. They're going to say, what the hell is that for? I mean, who on earth is going to need to do that 1,000 times? And we answer very, very quickly and succinctly.
It sounds like it's all about the journey, not the destination.
Well, I think that might be the problem in the world and you and I are on a parallel somewhat in our lives. You're certainly younger than I am, but we're on parallel that we didn't get recognized and supported, sponsored, defended in the arts before we began to take hold of it as something that was, and I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I would say for myself, sacred, that it's a sacred life pursuit. And you can't say that about every job we take on, but I think people who take on serious life paths, even if they're in the healing arts or they're in other fields that aren't descriptively the arts, there is some understanding that what we choose to do in our lives is sacred, but when people are given a lot of reward, acclamation, an unrealistic sense of what their offerings are worth in the world, I think what happens is that it goes on to a different scale, and it goes immediately into that marketplace identification, which is the pop. That's the pop marketplace. And it's not to say there aren't exceptions. There are always exceptions. But I think it's a dangerous game that the world plays with the arts, where we're much more enamored of a 12-year-old classical violinist than we are of a 65-year-old master violinist. And because it aligns more with our sensational aesthetic. And when we are looking out in the world, and we can do this today, we can do this when you were growing up, we can do it when I was growing up, we can do it in the future, it doesn't matter. There's always going to be an element of what we're looking at as a distortion in the marketplace, because the market wants to sell. The market does not want to inspire. If it inspires, that's terrific, and it will help them market more. But if it's the goal is to market something and to sell it, and when young people are tucked into that, they are just kind of like soldiers at war. They're not really disposed to being able to say, I don't think this is moral. I don't think this is right, Captain, or as a soldier might not be heard saying. An 18-year-old soldier is not going to be heard saying that. Otherwise, he's going to be kicked out. He's going to be kicked out. So what we're looking for in the marketplace, I think, is the same thing. We want beautiful, and let's emphasize that because it's true. There are exceptions. Not every artist is a feast for the eyes, but most in the marketplace now, and most in the immemorial marketplace, they're young and appealing, and they're talented. So we're not going to take away what they do have, because it's not that they're lacking appeal and talent. It's that there's more than likely not much of a communion with these things that have visited them, and clearly they're in touch enough to be able to perform, enough to be able to write or to collaborate in their writing, some of these young songwriters in the world. And I'm not saying that it all, I'm not going to be the person, I'm not going to be the old guy saying this work has no integrity. I'm not going to say that, because I don't think anything is ever so definitive in that way. I think there are problems inside of the marketplace approach to the arts, and it runs rampant, and we are seeing the poison fruit of it in the culture perpetually. And we're also seeing exceptions, and the exceptions do save us, but they don't really help solve the problem, because we just continue to do the same thing, and people come out younger and younger, and then we're also expecting them to be able to explain themselves. What are you talking about here? And the truth is, a lot of the content, and this is one of the hardships. What I understand about you is that you are interested in content. You are pursuing the arts because there's meaning there. You're not pursuing the arts just for the dazzling display and the talent element of it. And all of that needs to be in place. There's no question. You can't perform in the arts if you're not gifted, if you're not holding that torch as a with ability. But that would be, in my understanding, the baseline. That's not the ripe fruit on the tree. That's just the xylem and phloem of the plant. That's just the natural order of the plant. The fruit of the tree would be something, in my understanding, more distilled than that, and it would be inspirational. I think that's how I understand the arts. The arts.
That is a beautiful image. Yeah. That's how I began to think about it. And I think for me, when it comes to the arts, I've always known that there was it wielded there was some power behind it, and I needed to understand. I knew there's a responsibility that came with that power. At a very, very young age. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't articulate, but I knew that this thing had the potential to be destructive.
Yep.
I remember I was in grade 10. It was a media arts class, and I talk about the story all the time. So basically, our professor or teacher had a magazine cover. He put it on the overhead projector, told us to look at it for about 5 minutes, whatever, and just talk amongst ourselves. And then he was like, he had arrows on it. He's like, did your eyes go from here to here to here to here to here? I'm like, yeah, my eyes did that. He's like, they designed it like that. Mm-hmm. And for some strange reason, something in my head clicked. And I was like, I need to know more about that. Mm-hmm. There's a curiosity, like I need to know more about that. And that ultimately led to me getting into graphic design. Mm-hmm. But back to the fruit analogy, I think you've been able to sum it up beautifully, because the way I think about it now is, yes, now it took me a while. I'm not gonna lie, it took me a very long time to get to the point now that I'm at, to have that understanding of that responsibility. But I think now the responsibility is to bear fruit. To bear fruit, so somebody walking by can pick up something if they need it, or to be that light in the middle of the forest, or somebody that's lost, that doesn't know where they're going artistically.
I think that's a meaningful self-address, Chad. I really do. I think there might be maybe this misconception about the arts that it's just about having the gift. And I think with people who are on a path of luxuriating in that, maybe being able to go home at the end of the day and sit on it's that age-old front or back porch string band. There's something really beautiful about communing with these gifts and being able to express them whenever you want to. But I think they're beyond that, and that's outside of those bounds, and not necessarily neglecting those corners, because those are valuable corners in our culture, and we often learn a great deal about the arts from people who aren't pursuing them, but just happen to be connected to them because of their talent, because of their lifelong involvement in the arts, or the fact that they've been playing the banjo for 75 years or whatever the arrangement is. But we learn a lot from people like that because they do it for love. And artists, I think, are meant to take that torch, which is doing it for love, but doing it. Because if we as expositors of this are not reminding ourselves at different times that it's not about how the world perceives us for, let's say, one thing we did when we were 25, but it's really about pushing that back as far as possible without offending people who are saying they really value the offering. You want to commune with the people who think that what you're saying is meaningful, and at the same time, in no fashion at all, be convinced that that's enough, because it's not to take away the fact that you once made an impact. It's to remember that your role, even your job I think as a person who's committed to the arts and actually adopts it as a life path, it's to put the show on. You know, you have to give people the circus. You can't keep talking about the circus from
Yeah.
1978. You know,
Yeah.
that was the greatest circus that ever happened. Artists can't really live in that. If the world decides that your best work was when you were on sabbatical overseas, holed up in a hut somewhere, if they decide that's your high mark, and they do it all the time, they decide where people's heyday resides. I'm not going to tell the world what to think, and it's not really my design. But I'm also not going to listen too closely and have it that I loosen up my devotion, because
There has to be some
it's
distance.
yeah, as it goes, I think devotion in this particular forum of the arts, this milieu of the arts, I think devotion will take the people who are long-standing in it. It will take them to a fruitful place. It's not to say it goes on without us, but if you get into a practice where you're not marketplace, or as you mentioned before, result oriented, if you're looking at the journey is not devoid of fruit, and the fruit is potentially marketplace items, but it would be much more likened to someone growing apples in an orchard and then bringing these natural, purely grown, in no way poisoned, corrupted apples. These are perfectly pure apples, and then bringing them to market, because the market is a part of what we do, and it's not just so we can stay alive. It's not just that. It's kind of gets broken in the world's translation. Like, yeah, you have to eat, and sometimes I find myself rebutting, no, I don't. Eating is not the point. I'm not here to eat. I'm here to whisper into people's ear that art is a constantly renewing field. It would be the Elysian field. It would be the field that never fades. It doesn't have fallow seasons. It's a field that is always in bloom, and those of us who are in that field have to remember that. We don't talk about last year's crops, and last year's crops, even we can recognize that they were fantastic, but it's not about outdoing ourselves. It's about serving the field. And farmers are hopeful that since the last crop was so great, maybe this year will be as good. And if it's not as good, it doesn't matter, because this is all we get. This is it. And for artists, I think that's why it doesn't make any sense to move by any other pulse than the natural pulse of what it means to be in this field, and not to set goals like, oh, I have to do this much work today, but just to go into the space and be someone who understands that the fruit must come, but it's not, you don't force it. You just live it. You live it to its fruit. And it's not a strange thing once you understand that language. So there's a burden upon us, but it's not a burden like a deadline. It's a burden like a life burden of being kind to your neighbors, being a loving partner to somebody. These are burdens we bear, and they're not hard to manage if we are mindful of them. And it's not a strange thing for us to say about our lives that our lives are fruitful, because we're investing in it. And that is that liminal place, I think, inside of the pursuit of the arts, where it's not about outdoing yourself. It's not about outdoing someone else, for sure. It's just about doing like the orchard does, doing like the grass does, whatever image of perennial bloom is upon you. And I think that's not necessarily the way you see it, but it's a piece, if not a stronghold, of how I understand how to avoid the marketplace stricture, and woe in a way that, the burdens of the marketplace, and how to accompany the marketplace with legitimate. And for me, it's a very important thing to mention that the pure pursuit of the arts is what I'm committed to. And I think a lot of the time when young people are brought into the arts, I think what happens is the first thing they experience is that things get diluted, if not contaminated, before they even bring anything to market. But for people in our position, and I can say that as much as I know where you are, we're not really interested in people editing our work away from what it is we imagine it to be. We're still in a position because we understand that the pure pursuit of this is what makes it art.
And it's so beautiful once you can get to that position, because you reclaim your power. And I think that's something that I realized, especially with my first children's book. I was like, wait, hold on, let me see. Wait, so if I just like draw this to the best of my own ability with what I have right now, that's my like offering to the world, and that's perfectly fine. Even if it's imperfect, it's like, it's perfectly imperfect because you made it. And there's no one else is going to replicate it.
That's right.
And once I made that connection, I reclaimed my power.
No,
I was going to ask you a question, because we've touched on it before, but how important is having the ability to define things as an artist? How important would you say that is?
To define?
The ability to define.
I thought you said to defy.
I mean, you can go either or.
Either one. Either one.
Yeah.
To defy. I think I'll just touch on the defiance element. I think is very critical. I think that is maybe the core of my understanding of the arts. It is about defiance, and it's not about alienation, but it's about introducing counter perspectives so that the dialogue in the world can be enriched. All of that. I think that's a critical part of the arts, and there's a piece of that that's loosened up in the world. It's not as prevalent as it has been at different times, and I think as cultures maneuver in cycles, we get back to places where there's more of an active rebelliousness, more of a protest element to music. In literature, there's more of a satirical leaning, if not pure satire, which is where my heart lies. So that part is very important. But regarding definition, to define the work, I don't think everyone in the arts can do that, nor should everyone be in a position, or nor is everyone found in a position where he or she has to. I think some people's work speaks for itself. I think when you go into worlds that aren't common, and if you are aligning with a defiance, then both of these words really do belong together. The idea of being able to define the work, if it's in a fashion of ekphrasis, where you have a description next to the work of art to tell people what the art is about, that part, I think that it's very important, as long as you're doing things that are challenging people's imagination, and the world is not naturally inspiring imagination right at present. So those people who are in the arts, I think, do have a certain responsibility, and I do don this myself very sincerely. I think it is part of the teaching, part of helping people understand the art before they can embrace the art. And if you think that people aren't embracing the art, it might be because it's not ready for them. It's not available to them. And it's simply that you have to help it along a little bit. You have to describe, you have to give people a chance to understand what it is you're trying to do, because a lot of this stuff drifts away, and it doesn't take that long inside of a particular culture. Cultures diminish very quickly, and then they can rejuvenate. It's not to say that I don't believe it's a fatal path for any culture. I think the cultures are constantly experiencing transition. And what we're experiencing now in the culture, is, I think there's a bit of there's a desiccation. It's a desert experience that we're experiencing in the culture to a degree. And then there are bright moments here and there. But I do think that the culture is not where it's going to be again. I think the cycle will continue. And because people are going to long for more substance, more meaning, it'll be there if those of us who are maybe keepers of it are willing to help that process along, and not be frustrated by the fact that people simply don't understand, or that there's not enough of an aesthetic in the culture for people to embrace something that isn't straightforward. And I'd say that there's always a disposition in people to reach a deeper aesthetic, and the people who are keepers of it have to do that. So I think, to answer your question in a particular fashion today, where I see the world being right now, and I'm ever hopeful that the tide keeps turning, but I think it's just part of my responsibility as a creative person who's committed deeply to this, not to lose people before I even begin, and to hold them as much as I can, to hold them dear, and to care and see myself, or see someone like you in everyone I see around me, not look at people and see that there's no way they could embrace this. I don't know that they can, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to give people every opportunity to have rich interior lives, short maybe of playing the fiddle on their back porch every night, or short of playing the violin in a concert hall, or doing anything in a really substantial way. But I think the beginning of changing the course of the tide in the world culture with the arts, it's about aesthetic. And if we have a limited aesthetic in the culture, then more than likely we're going to come to understand that we're not hearing music being played as much from the house next door. And I don't mean pumping through the sound system. I mean people singing, people sitting around a piano, people sitting on their back porch. Right. We're not hearing as much of that. People are not banding about poems and dialogue regarding aesthetic, regarding, do you think this is valuable? Where is the morality when it comes to expression in the arts? Do we have a burden to bear with high-mindedness? Do the arts connote high-mindedness, or are the arts separate from that? Can we loosen up our commitment to the welfare of humanity as artists? Does it matter? Are we about ourselves, or are we about others? These are all, in my understanding, these are all basic points of dialogue. This could be the substance of the culture. Tomorrow, you and I could wake up and walk outside and hear a hum that isn't the hum of cell phones and passing
highways,
cars, but it could be a murmur of people having conversations about, in essence, the meaning. That's not to be as wide as the meaning of life, but that's not a terrible place to begin. But I think that's what art is for. We're not ancillary members of the culture. We are core members of the culture who are, in our essence, lowly, and that lowly place is the secret. That it's that Ella Fitzgerald bliss. It's that that there's something going on there, and you can imagine if we had everyone in the culture, instead of all the young people in the culture wanting to be movie stars and rock stars. Imagine if we had people understanding because their parents are teaching them about aesthetic. Imagine if we really had a culture where people want to be lowly servants of the arts because they understand that that's where the experience of life is founded. And that's how we take care of each other. That's how we look after each other's spiritual and emotional welfare. And there, I mean, that's too that's too expansive for today's conversation. But I think the root of the arts is inspiration, and it's not
Yeah.
for the artists, it's for everybody. And the artists just happen to have whatever that genetic code is, whatever that life turn, that whatever that trauma, whatever that hardship, whatever that element of longing, the blood that's shed, whatever it is that anoints some of these people in this world to become expositors and truly distilled spokesmen and women of this form. Whatever it is, it's for everyone. And we have to have people who are able to do it well, and we have to have people who defend its true condition, not just say, yeah, it's great to be a rock star, because everyone knows that. I mean, that's not, you're not going to hear that from me, because that I am not. But I do celebrate the same life as some of the rock stars do. I have the same. I'm working with world-class musicians. I'm composing all the time. I'm performing a lot. I wish all the time, but I'm performing a lot, and I'm doing my work. So I'm living that, as we talked about. I'm living that. It's not. I wouldn't say it's underground, but I would say it's a little bit less ostentatious.
How does that feel? Because that's something I've been experiencing more that I've been jumping into these podcasts.
Yeah.
Just hearing other creatives and hearing their experiences and drawing the parallels and whatnot. Yeah. How has that affected you, working with world-class musicians, actors, and all that other stuff? How is that, like, as an artist yourself, to be able to help guide somebody to become or have a better understanding of themselves? Like, how does that feel to witness that and watch that?
To be in the company of these elders, or these extraordinary people. Well, yeah. I think it's an emboldening feature. But if ever one has questions because he or she is not getting, let's say, ample recognition for being a true representative in the arts, if you're not, and I would say I'm certainly in that category. I don't get ample recognition for what I do, and I know that I'm doing substantial work, and I know that I'm doing work constantly. So I'm putting myself in a position where it could happen, and it's always today. There's always a chance today, and I'm welcoming it. And it wouldn't be much of a transition if it did. Partly because I have communed in the centerpiece of the arts, which is performing, recording, certainly rehearsing with people who are wielding these tremendous gifts, and many of whom I've crossed paths with, who have many of whom have the gift and the humility that attends it. So that influence was it was wonderful to see, because you never know when you're imagining what it would be like not to work with a really fine conservatory cellist, but to work with someone like Yo-Yo Ma. And I haven't worked with Yo-Yo Ma, but I've worked with this gentleman named Hank Roberts, who's on that level. He's a jazz cellist, and he's got a history, and some people know him, most people don't, sadly. But I've crossed into different people at that level, different people's musical paths, and the experience isn't just about the artistry and the musicianship. It's about the humility. And there are other people, and I would even mention a few names here, because these people are very dear to me, and I think they're on the same level. I work with a piano player named Hunter Gibson, and I work with a drummer and percussionist named Chris Howard. My partner May Rav, and my other singing partner Christina DeMaio. These are all world-class people I've worked with, and they move me to no end, and they put me in a position in my life where, if I'm ever thinking that I'm misguided about what I'm capable of doing and whether or not I'm true to what I'm doing, somehow they remind me without saying a word, because we're in the element together and it's just in some ways it's just assumed by them that this is where we belong, and I'm the one bringing the compositions and I'm the one making the music with them. So it's so if ever, as you can attest the same as I, we're in a position at different times to have self-doubt, and that's a normal thing. And even though we don't want to wait for the world to tell us that we're acceptable or that we're doing something meaningful, sometimes when you get into the company of accomplished peers or accomplished fellows in your life, it somehow settles into place that, well, I guess I belong here because these people aren't looking at me like, what is he doing here? And it is a strange thing to have to fight for that, but at the same time, I just think it's a natural thing to have to check in every once in a while and think, am I fooling myself here, or am I in place? And I'm volunteering that just because it's a human thing. But it doesn't plague me. It just, once in a while, since you don't have people contacting you or leaning on you for your artistry or for your expertise every day, you have to go into the well, and you have to be confident enough to say, well, even the muse wouldn't call me back if I didn't have some purpose here. So the combination of being in the element every day of my life, or most every day of my life, and having a surrounding group of musicians in my life and creative people in my life who are all on a really exceptional plane of artistry, I think it all speaks the language naturally. It's back to that grove. It just seems like it's growing naturally, but you're still looking at it. You're still looking at it, and you want to know. And maybe it's just one's own humility. Like you don't want to find yourself, and I think that I can speak for both of us here. You don't want to find yourself outmatched for your pursuit. You want to know that you're the right person for your path. And having self-doubt is a meaningful reckoning, as long as it's just a reckoning, because you can't afford to walk around in that kind of a disposition. You do have to armor yourself, and because the arts tend to put us in, as we've talked about before, in our conversation before today, we talked about this childlike place, and that childlike place is not confident, but it's definitely energizing and emboldening. So we kind of juggle these emotions as we're communing. We're not communing in a place of power, but we are witnessing power in humility, in this obeisance, where we rather get on our knees and bow down to this force that's greater than ourselves, and we embody it somehow. So we're communing with it. All of that's emboldening, but it's not a warrior's kind of experience where you don't have to lower your sword. You have to lay everything down at the door. It's like you have to, I don't know if you feel this way, but I feel that the whole nature of this pursuit is about taking everything that you have to identify yourself in a given day and leaving it at the door. Sword, shield, helmet.
It's hilarious.
Whatever it is.
It's hilarious. I actually, I in my 20s, I studied a lot of Buddhism, Taoism, all of that stuff, and a lot of it spoke about going into the woods or going into the mountains and just being by yourself. And I signed up for that, and I did that. And one thing that I did was I went camping, and I remember I had like an hour's worth of a trail all to myself. And I remember being like, I'm going to leave my cell phone, I'm going to leave anything, all my protective gear, all of that. And I'm going to go into it. And you hit the nail right on the head. Oh, sorry, 1 second. It's just the fire.
Fire alarm system. Please disregard all alarms until further notice. I repeat, we will now be conducting a test of your fire alarm system. Please disregard all alarms until further notice. Thank you.
Sorry about that. And it is, yeah, 100%. Everybody check your fire alarms. I think there is a part of you where you have to go into yourself and look at everything, including, sorry. Thank you. Yep. You have to go inside of yourself and really be comfortable looking in the crevices and looking in the cracks. And the one scary thing that happened for me was, am I who I thought I was?
Mm-hmm.
Is this character that I've created, this who I am?
Yep.
And I think what it ultimately led to was this this idea of that image and this thing that I created of dying, and then what it would look like having like a clean slate, for lack of a better term. And that, to be quite frankly, scared the shit out of me.
Yep.
And that's what kind of led to a depression, because I gave up this thing that I knew I was, and this thing I created, or who I at least thought I was. And now I'm in this almost void.
Mm-hmm.
And back to like the childlike essence you touched on, I think the really cool thing about that is children don't really generally understand what confidence is. They just are.
Yep.
And I think once I started to fall into just being myself,
yep,
that was the hardest part. Like that's when I started to, okay, like this is what I'm about. This is my value system. This is what it inspires me, and this is what I care about. And that's when I started to really cultivate my person and my character on the self-discovery journey. How would you describe self-discovery, and what would you have to say about that? I'm curious what your thoughts are regarding it.
Yeah. I think it comes composition to composition, and I think it's a daily reckoning. And the initial force that leads people to a place where they're not dallying in these pursuits, and there are plenty of people who are dallying, and they're dallying for years, but when you recognize that you're not dallying in this pursuit of the arts, I think the exposure to the medium, whatever it is, and you and I both have a bit of a palette of expression, so it's not one thing that motivates us. We see it all being tucked into a single artistic identity, or at least an artistic realm. But those demands, and when you catch sight of what it is that it takes to make it, that it isn't simply a pursuit that has you feeling good about yourself, because there is that, that breakthrough day, even when one is going to the gym, where it's fun to imagine that you'll be in better shape, and all the people are told, they're also told at the beginning, oh, come join this gym because it'll be like eating an ice cream sundae, and it's not. But they're told that, and they're convinced of that, and because it's new, and because they want so much to be in shape, they're in it, and it is pleasurable. And then there's a point where it's no longer pleasurable. But if they're going to commit to what it means to get into shape or to be in shape, they make that leap. And I think that's what it's like in the arts when you're young. And I can speak for myself. I don't know exactly what age you were when you picked up the bass guitar, but I picked up the guitar at 11 after having played the piano a little bit and deciding that I didn't want to take lessons anymore when I was quite young. And I tried different instruments. And then the guitar came, and the guitar stayed with me from the time I was 11. And today it's my centerpiece instrument. And along the way, we get opportunities to say to ourselves, are we doing this for fun? Is this feeling really good? Or are we ready to bleed a little bit for this? And with instruments, when we're learning them, they do hurt. It hurts our fingers. You have that report, I'm sure. My fingers hurt, but I was young enough not to be playing 7 hours a day. I wasn't. I had so many other things going on, but I was playing. And I think by the time I was 15 or 16, I was aware that this is still fun. This is still an opportunity to have people come by, have people say things like, wow, I didn't know you played the guitar. I didn't know you sang like that. So getting some feedback, but I don't think that's what motivated me even early on. I think I found a love affair starting very young, and despite the